Hello and welcome to today's yoga class. We're going to take a look at the core, and there's many different aspects of the core. We have the front, we have the back, we have the sides, we have the lower areas, mid and upper areas, and then we've got the superficial areas, and then back behind that the deep core. So it's not a simple matter of just building strength. It is balancing the core. If you have one set of muscles that are overly developed and another set that are weak, then that imbalance is going to pull the spine out of alignment. It's going to cause degeneration, put undue pressure on certain areas of the discs, and make you more prone for injury. So I'm going to teach kind of a generic well balance and emphasize balancing out those different areas. If you know of all of those different areas where you're strongest and where you're weakest, then you're welcome to shift your practice, and I'd recommend doing this so that you de-emphasize the areas that are already strong and cultivate the areas that are weak, and again with an eye towards finding balance. So again, we're balancing the left and the right with the front and the back. We're balancing the lower with the upper body, and we're balancing the superficial with the deep core. Typically, most people are weaker in the deep core, stronger on the superficial, the more visual, the areas that we can see and that we're more conscious of. So first, take a moment to find a comfortable seated position. Close your eyes. And then see if you can begin to connect with your deeper and lower area of your torso by breathing diaphragmatically, taking the breath down into not just the belly but the pelvic floor and the lower back and the lower sides. Allow those areas to expand as you breathe in. Towards the end of the exhale, firm up those areas. Lift the pelvic floor slightly, firm the abdomen, firm the sides, firm the back, the low back. As you continue to practice this breathing, begin relaxing your face, the forehead, the eyebrows, the eyelids, the eyeballs, the space behind the eyeballs, the jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Allow the breath to be slower, smoother, softer, more fluid. Begin delicately to float your head a little to the left or to the right, and slowly, lazily floating your head around, not trying to stretch it, just exploring the range of free movement and relaxing into that. Any sensations you're creating should be pleasant, not unpleasant. Five or six breaths. Keep coming back to the face, relaxing the jaws, the lips, the tongue, the eyeballs, the cheeks. Coming back to center. So there's one additional idea of balance that we should consider with our core, and that is the balance between strength and flexibility. So for some people, They have a very strong core, but they're very compact, and the fascia is kind of gripped. And even though they're strong, they develop problems because they can't expand. They don't have that flexibility. For other people, the problem is the opposite. They have too much flexibility and not enough strength. Okay? So depending on which side of that equation you're on, you can emphasize the expansion and the flexibility aspects if you are already strong but lack flexibility. On the other hand, those of you that are hypermobile, don't go to your full range. Stay well within your range of motion, hang back from that edge a little bit, and then focus on more on the strength component. Okay. So first we're going to warm up with a gentle twist, leading with the right shoulder. Reach behind you, cross the left hand over, lift, expand, and rotate. 2 or 3 breaths. We're going to do this a couple times, so just warming up here. While you're here, play a little bit. Float the ribs around in a circle. Roll the shoulders around, especially the right shoulder blade. Take a breath or 2. And coming back to center, leading with the left shoulder. Crossing the right hand over, lift, expand, rotate, breathe into this. Once again, play with the ribs circling and with the shoulders, especially the left shoulder blade. Take a breath or 2. Coming back to center, circling one direction and then the opposite with the rib cage. Roll out the shoulder blades. Coming back to center. Now we're going to twist again, but this time rather than focusing on flexibility, range of motion, we're going to focus on building strength in the transverse muscle, the horizontal muscle that helps us to rotate, and trying to emphasize the transverse. So the obliques, which run diagonally, can help us twist, but they pull us down as we twist. Okay? So if we keep an emphasis on lifting and twisting, the obliques will have to release to permit the lifting, and as they release, the transverse has to take over. So put your emphasis on extension with rotation. So we're going to take the arms out of the equation by not holding on to the knee or the floor, keeping your hands off the ground. Lift and begin to rotate. Now again, emphasize lifting through the chest and taking that right shoulder back. Take the shoulder blade down, lift the chest up and rotate. Now at some point you'll meet some resistance, and that's where we begin to work to build a little strength. So once you meet the resistance, then begin to work a little more. Using that right shoulder to pull you around as you lift the chest. And then reaching around with the left shoulder in front. Take a breath or 2. Come back to center. Circle with the ribs and reverse. Second side. Lift, rotate. Find that left shoulder or shoulder blade. Draw the shoulder blade around and down. Lift the chest up. And then bring your right shoulder around in front of you. Take the left shoulder behind. Shoulder blade descending, chest lifting. When you meet resistance, then begin to lift and rotate. 2 or 3 breaths. One more breath. Come back to center, circle the ribs, and reverse. And roll out the shoulders. And coming back to center. Take a breath or two. Coming onto your hands and knees. Cat-cow. Start the movement with the tailbone. Lift the tailbone, lower the belly, open the chest, look up, breathe in. Tuck the tailbone round low back, mid back, upper back, tuck the chin as you breathe out. On your own, continue. One more breath. And then back to neutral. So begin to work now with our back muscles. We can work the lower back more with a leg lift. We can work the upper back with an arm lift, and we can do both to work the entire back. Start with the leg. Float your right leg back and lift it up a little bit. Now, we can also experiment with shifting the work to the left side or the right side of the low back. So try rolling your right hip down and lifting the leg up. And then allow the right hip to lift up a little bit as you lift the leg even higher. And just feel, see if you can feel the difference. Try bending the elbows and dropping the chest a little as you lift the leg, or lifting back up. Take a breath or two. See if you can feel how each little movement changes which muscles become involved. Set the knee down, round the back, exhale. Back to neutral. Float the left leg back and up. Experiment, roll the left hip down as you lift the leg up. And then roll the left hip up as you continue lifting. Drop your chest, bending the elbows a little bit, straightening. All the while trying to feel the workout moving into different areas. And then a couple of cat-cows. Back to neutral. Now we'll focus on moving the work up into the mid and upper back more with an arm lift. When you're ready, float your right arm out in front of you and then lift not the hand, but try to lift from the shoulder blade and the inner armpit. When you meet resistance, ease up and then come back into the resistance a couple times, and then if it feels right to you, begin to work. Don't start to work until it feels right, where there's no pinching or binding. Take a breath and set the hand down, round the back, cat-cow. Back to neutral. Float the left arm out, again lifting not the hand, but lifting the shoulder blade, lifting the inner armpit, sinking the chest. Back off, push back into it, back off, push back into it, and kind of play with the shoulder blade, the chest until you can work and it feels healthy. Feel the muscles that are doing the work for you. Focus on working in a way that those muscles feel like they're getting just the right amount of work. Cat-cow. Back to neutral. Now we'll put the arm and leg together. Start with the right leg, then the left arm. Lift the inner armpit, lift the thigh. Now notice, where do you feel weaker, the upper back or the low back? And ease up on the area that's a little stronger, and then focus on working on the area that feels a little weaker, less conscious. Take a breath or two. Cat-cow. Back to center. Left leg, right arm. Don't assume it'll be the same as the first side. Try to feel your way around, identifying what feels stronger, what feels weaker. Ease up a little bit on the areas that feel strong, and then try to work the areas that feel weaker. Take a breath or two. Cat-cow. And then extended child's pose. Take your knees wide. Sink your hips back. Walk your hands forward. Lower the head. And then adjust until you're completely comfortable. 10 or 15 breaths. Three or four breaths. Coming back upright. Now working with plank. With plank, we want to be careful of the wrists and the shoulders, especially when we open into side plank. And we also want to make sure we're protecting the low back. So rather than trying to do a plank that looks good, focus on a way that feels safe and where you're getting a good workout. Okay? Measure success by the quality of the workout, not the visual representation. Keep your left knee where it is. Step the right leg back. Tuck the toes under. Spread the fingers wide. Root. And then if you remember from last week, spiral the arms. Push down through the knuckle of the index finger. And then rotate so that the inner armpit is rolling forward. The outside of your arms are rolling back towards your knees. Keeping that, begin to take the weight out of the left foot and out of the left knee until they just barely come off the ground, and hold. Now this position is good. because you can work just as hard here without stepping the leg back, but if you get tired, your knee hits the ground before your hips can sink into any danger. Take a breath or two. Bring the right knee forward, step the left leg back. And then again, begin to take weight out of the right foot and the right knee until they come off the ground, so the knee and the foot are floating but close to the floor. Take a breath or two. And then cat-cow. And back to neutral. Now for side plank, we're going to keep the knee under us, so it's kind of a similar idea where we let the bent leg support our weight. Take the right leg back and then see if you can find your balance and lift the right hand towards the ceiling. The right leg is straight and strong. Your shoulders over your wrist, fingers are spread wide, and then you take some of the weight out of the left knee and the left foot. Make sure your shoulder's okay, make sure your knee's okay. If this is easy, you can lift the knee and the foot off the ground so that they aren't carrying any weight. If you get tired, let the legs support you. Couple breaths. Coming back down, cat-cow. Side plank, we're working into some areas that normally don't get a good workout. When you're ready, step the left leg back, lift the left hand and find your balance, float the arm up, try to open your hips and your chest and your shoulders. Left leg straight and strong, and then see if you can begin to take some of the weight out of the right knee and foot. Try to open the chest. If you get tired, let your right knee carry some of your weight. If you get a second wind, try to lift the right knee off the floor. Make sure your right shoulder and wrist are not complaining. Take a breath or two. And cat-cow. And then back to neutral. Tuck your toes under. Walk your hands in close to your knees. Lift the hips, standing forward bend. Hands either resting on your thighs or leaning into a deeper stretch if you prefer. Bend the left knee a little more and move the stretch into the right leg. Bend the right knee a little more, stretch the left. Go side to side. Balance the weight evenly. Stretch both legs for a breath or two. And then roll back up to standing. Check your feet, hip width, outer edges parallel. Check for symmetry. Anchor the big toes, flare little toes out wide. If you know how to spiral the legs, start there. If not, don't worry about it. Now try to lift the pelvic floor. Lifting from the sphincter and then the central and then the front pelvic floor. Lift and draw up a little bit. You'll feel your low abdomen firming up when you do that. Float the chest. Now for a lot of people, we tighten the erector spinae too much and this causes this overarching in the low back. So if that applies to you or you think it might apply to you, let the tailbone sink and lift the chest up at the same time. If you're having trouble figuring that out, put one hand on the sacrum, one hand on the chest, and use your hands to give yourself a visual or kinesthetic cue. Stroke down on the pelvis and lift up on the chest. And then you'll notice the abdomen draws in when you do that. So then draw the abdomen in, firming up here, and standing for a few breaths like that. If you're doing it correctly, you may start to get a little bit of fatigue, and that is a good area to feel fatigued. That's an area you want to build some strength in. Sinking the tailbone, lifting the chest. Now those of you who have naturally flat backs, don't worry about that as much. Vinyasa Sun Salutation. Stretch overhead as you breathe in, and then float the hips back, release into a forward bend as you breathe out. Roll up, let the knees buckle, stack the vertebra on your own. As you bring the arms overhead, lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, sink the tailbone, lift the chest, and then take your shoulders back just to where you feel a little resistance, but don't lose control of the lower core. So focusing on strengthening your core as you're working with this sequence. Five or six more repetitions. Couple more times. Hold your next overhead stretch. Add a side stretch. Lift the left heel, flare the right ribs. Lift the right heel, flare the left ribs. Go side to side. Come back to center. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, sink the tailbone, lift the chest, and take the shoulders back. Draw the navel in. Supported forward bend. Take a breath or two. And then release into full forward bend. 3 or 4 breaths. And then rolling back up to standing. So one of the dangers of a highly choreographed workout, especially one that's repeated ongoing, is that every workout leads to imbalances. It strengthens certain areas, neglects other areas. So to make sure that we're getting a well-balanced workout, it helps to play a little bit with the work. So using a wall, holding onto the wall with your fingertips, stepping back with your feet a little bit, reach your hips back, sink your chest a little bit, and then now I can begin to play. So floating the right leg back and up, And then I can lift one arm off the wall and work the shoulders more. I can roll the hip up, I can roll the hip down, I can twist one way or the other. And the entire time I'm working different areas of the back. Taking the knee out to the side, reaching around behind you. Take a breath or two or three. Identify which position feels the weakest. Make sure it's not painful though. Make sure it feels healthy but weak, and then work that muscle or that area. And then set the foot down. Take the left leg back and up, and repeat on the second side. Roll the left hip up or down. Lift your chest up, sink your chest through. Lift one hand off and work with your shoulder, or the other side, twisting. Taking your knee out to the side or round behind you. Try to increase the complexity and variety, all the while noticing what feels strongest, what particular position feels natural and strong, and what position feels weak. Again, making sure it's not the joints complaining, that making sure it's the muscles that feel weak, and then working into that area. One more breath. Coming back down. And then cat-cow with your hands on the wall. Focus not on trying to make it a perfect cat-cow, whatever that is in this position, but on kind of doing something that's kind of like cat-cow but feels good. Knees can be bent or straight. Elbows can be bent or straight. And then coming back to standing. Coming to the floor, roll up your blanket for back roll. If you have your own roller, go ahead and take a moment to set that up. Roll the blanket up tight. We're going to be working in a few minutes, so we're going to use this next 4 or 5 minutes to relax. If this gets intense, unroll your blanket to make it easier. Start with your shoulders just above the roller. Occasionally lift the hips, push yourself over the roller an inch, set the hips down, and relax into the new position. Slowly working your way down the spine, one vertebra at a time. Go for about 3 more minutes. Those of you moving slowly should be about halfway down or further. Those of you who find you're finishing a little earlier, just go back to the shoulders and start over. Couple more minutes. Ten or 15 more breaths. When you're finished, lift your hips, remove the roller, keeping your hips off the ground as you set your small of your back down. And then draw one knee into your chest, hugging the knee, draw the other knee in, and rock side to side. Releasing any tension from the low back. Roll to one side, come up to sitting. Next we'll work with Dandasana. Extend your legs out in front of you. Reach through the heels, pull the toes back, internally rotate the thighs slightly. Reach the sit bones back as you reach the heels forward. Lengthen the back of the legs. Press down through the sit bones, lift up through the sternum. Roll the shoulders back and down, chest forward and up until you feel the upper back working and the mid back working. And take a few breaths. Couple more breaths. And then bend the knees. Now if you watch for a moment. As we come into ship with oars, there's many variations, and the variations are designed to help keep you safe or challenge you depending on your strength and conditioning of your body. So let me demonstrate real quickly. I can keep my feet on the floor and use my hands. I can take my hands away, but if I don't have the back strength, what I don't want to do is to collapse. So if I need to use my hands to maintain that length of the spine, fine. If that's too easy, I can lift one leg or the other or both. I can let go, I can straighten a little bit, I can straighten a lot, okay? So start with both feet on the floor. Grab your knees, pull your chest forward and up, roll the shoulders back and down. And then decide whether or not you're already getting enough of a workout here. And if that's too easy, consider floating your heels off the ground, using your hands to maintain the length of your spine. If that's still easy, use your hands less or let go. And then if that's still too easy, straighten the legs a little bit. Now, don't fixate on straightening the legs all the way. Fixate on the spine. Keeping the spine long, the chest open. Take a breath or two. And then extend the legs and relax with a forward bend. Knees can be a little bent, or if you prefer, straight. Breathe deep, stretch the exhale. Two or three breaths. Now, if you'll watch for just a moment, I'm going to bring my knees to my chest, interlace my fingers behind my neck, press the kidneys down until the weight comes out of my shoulders and my head a little bit. And if this is sufficient, I stay here. If this is too easy, I straighten one leg halfway or all the way, and then alternate. And if that's too easy, I straighten both legs a little bit, or I straighten my legs a little more. What you do not want to do is arch your back as you're straightening. So keep the low back fixed, pressed into the floor. So give this a try. Start off hugging your knees, rock side to side. That'll help you get a little bit of length in the spine. Interlace your fingers behind your neck and either stay here or straighten one leg a little bit until you feel like you're working, and then alternate. And those of you that need more of a challenge, straighten both legs a little bit or all the way. If that's still too easy, lift your shoulders, balance on the sit bones, reaching the arms in front of you. Hold until you decide you're ready to rest, and then hug both knees. Rock side to side. Take a few breaths here. Breathe deep. Stretch the exhale. We're going to work now with the side and then the back muscles. So roll on to your right side, and we're going to lift the rib cage, move it away from the hips, set it down so we get some length through the right side of the rib cage. Your right hand and elbow can support your head, and then both legs straight, and then bend the right knee 90 degrees for extra stability. Now take your left leg and begin to lift it. Try to bring the left hip forward a little bit so that your left hip and right hip are stacked, vertical. Take a breath or two, and notice when you meet resistance, push into the resistance slightly, and then notice what feels like it's fatiguing. Where do you feel the work? Now, take your hip forward just an inch. The left hip comes forward an inch, the left leg goes back an inch, and lift. Point your toes towards the ceiling as you lift. Point your heel towards the ceiling as you lift. And the whole time, try to notice how that feels. Take the left hip back slightly and point the toes up and lift. You may be able to lift a little higher. And then rotate until the heel is lifting. And then Come back to your starting position and then lower the leg. Try this on the opposite side. Support. Lengthen the lower rib cage. Use your left hand to support your head. Bend the left knee, straighten the right leg. And then when you're ready, lift the right leg. To start with, keep your foot horizontal so your heel and your little toe are lifting at the same speed. And then bring the right hip forward slightly so that your hips are stacked. And then lift until you meet resistance. Notice where you're feeling this. Then take your hip forward just an inch, and then experiment with lifting through the little toe more or lifting through the heel more. Taking the leg back behind you slightly or bringing it out in front of you slightly. Take the hip back and then experiment with the leg, rotating and moving. The entire time looking for the areas that feel natural and strong, and then de-emphasizing them slightly, looking for the areas where it feels a little weaker, less conscious, less familiar, and holding and working into those areas a little more. Take a breath or two as you come back to your starting position, and then lower your leg. Coming onto your stomach now, and Sphinx. Walk your elbows out in front of your shoulders slightly, the arms extended. Press the tops of your feet into the floor. Reach your chest forward, pull the shoulders back. Take a few breaths. Now, if it feels safe to you, you can walk your hands back into Cobra. If you feel vulnerable, come down and then walk your hands back and then lift back up again. Walking your hands back under you slightly. Remember not to push with the arms. We're trying to build strength in the core. So shrug the shoulders, roll the shoulders back, squeeze the shoulder blades together, draw the shoulder blades down and reach the chest forward. Press the feet down. Take a breath or two. Now try to emphasize working the upper back. Come down slightly and work the shoulders and the chest more. And then emphasize the low back by easing up on the shoulders and chest and lifting up a little higher. When you're ready, downward facing dog. Breathe deep. 5 or 10 breaths. Spiral the arms if you remember how from last week. Draw the chest through towards your feet. Reach the heels towards the floor. Lift the arches. Three or 4 breaths. One more breath. Cat-cow. And back to neutral. Find a comfortable seated position. So now we're going to play a little bit, and the purpose of this is to increase the variety and complexity of our workout for the core, but also to teach the nervous system. The nervous system controls how the muscles work together. So you can have a bunch of musicians, each one knows how to play their own instrument, but if they don't know how to play together, if everyone is playing different music, it's a disaster. So the whole idea of an orchestra is that the conductor knows when to bring up one area, when to tamp it down, when to stop it, when to bring in another area, and that we're coordinating all of that to make the music. So I'm going to be working the front, the sides, the back, the lower areas, the upper areas, the superficial, the deep, and I'm going to do it without really thinking too much, just playing. Okay, so watch. So right now, front. You can see now I'm getting a little bit more into the side. Now it's moving into the back. Now it's moving into the other side. Now it's moving into the front. So you can play with your shoulders, you can play with your chest. And the entire time, working in a way that feels good. So give that a try. Start off seated. Lean back, place your hands on the floor behind you. See if you can lift your knees, keeping them bent. Give yourself a little workout for the front core. And then begin to roll to your right. And maybe drop onto your elbow and begin to work into the side. And then roll your hips over a little further, so you begin to work into the back. And then when your left hip touches the floor, you'll be in kind of a cobra. On your own, play. Breathe, try not to think. Experiment with playing very lightly and then working harder. Try to increase the variety and complexity of your play. And the entire time, focus on the quality of sensation. Finding ways of moving that feel good. 4 or 5 breaths. See if you can transition fluidly into downward facing dog, working the whole time. This will be our last work for today. 5 or 6 breaths. Bringing the right knee forward when you're ready. Sliding the left leg back. Pigeon. Come into a gentle pigeon, take a breath or two, and then decide whether you want to go deeper. Stretch the exhale. Five or 6 more breaths, leaning into the stretch a little more if it feels good. Switching sides, come back to downward facing dog. Left leg coming through, right leg reaching and walking back. Find a gentle stretch, take a breath or 2. Notice how the body's responding and either back off, stay where you are, or work deeper, depending on how the body feels. Five or 6 or 7 breaths. Come back to sitting. So we'll do a spinal twist, and this time we'll focus on building strength in the transverse a little bit, but primarily in the diagonal bands, okay? The internal and external obliques. So to create that effect, we're going to, instead of using the twist to increase range of motion and relax, we're going to use it to build strength. Let me demonstrate. Taking my arms out to the side, palms down, knees to my chest. And then I take my knees in one direction, turn my head in the other. When I feel resistance, I hold, and then slowly I start to lift, come back to center, go to the opposite side. Now, if that's too easy, I straighten the legs a little bit or a lot. And I don't want to actually touch the floor. I want to stop before I reach the ground and then come back up again. Take your legs over far enough that you're working, but not so far that you lose control. Okay. So lay flat on the floor, take your arms out horizontal, press your palms down, press your shoulders down, bring your knees to your chest. Do the first one with the knees bent. Swing your knees to the left, turn your head to the right. Take your legs over until you feel a workout, but don't go all the way to the floor. Now, to work harder, when you start to lift the legs back towards center, lift very slowly the first inch. The slower, the better. Then, normal speed. Cross to the second side. Take the legs over until you feel like you're working a little bit. And then when you're ready to come back to center, the first inch that you start lifting the legs ever so slowly, and then speeding up. Continue on your own. If this is a little too easy, straighten the legs partly or all the way. Those of you that are really strong, the legs are straight and you take your legs over until the heel is an inch off the ground, but don't actually touch the floor. If you touch the floor, you'll lose the work. As you start to fatigue, bend the knees more or make the movement a little smaller. A couple more times either side. And then find a relaxed twist on the first side. Take 4 or 5 breaths. Stretch the exhale. And relax into your twisted position. Switch sides, take 4 or 5 breaths in any relaxed, twisted position. Then coming flat on your back for Shavasana, and either keeping your knees straight or bending the knees or supporting them with a pillow. If you aren't sure, try several different positions and then choose the one that felt most comfortable to you, especially for the low back. You want a position that feels safe and relaxing. Relax your face, your jaws, your lips, your tongue, your mouth. Fingers, hands, arms, and shoulders. Feet, ankles, calves, knees, and thighs. Loosen hips, relax the buttocks. Low back, the belly, the kidneys, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the back of the neck, and soften the throat. The jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Especially the cheeks and the eyes and the eyeballs, space behind the eyeballs, and the root of the tongue. The eyelids, the eyebrows, the forehead. Temples, soft and hollow, and relaxing the scalp and the crown. Breathing a little deeper. Yawning. And then slowly, lazily opening into a stretch. Arching, twisting, roll to one side. Pushing up to a comfortable seated position. So there are two types of feedback loops, negative and positive. Negative feedback loops stabilize. They help to keep a system in check. If it starts to get out of balance, there's a pushback to keep it in stability. The feedback loops we have to be very cautious of are the positive feedback loops. Those do the opposite. If you get slightly out of balance, they push you further out of balance. So for instance, standing in tree pose. If you lean slightly, it becomes harder not to lean more. And the further you lean, the harder it becomes not to lean even further. It's a positive feedback loop. So there, maintaining the center becomes incredibly important. And if you start to move out of center even slightly, it becomes increasingly more difficult to recover your balance. So the same is true for our muscular development or our spiritual development. Or our emotional hobbies, our habits. If you think about the activities you love to do, it's activities that come naturally to you, generally speaking. Okay? And those activities that come naturally to you, you get good at, you do them more, and there's only so many hours in a day, so that means that you are spending less time developing the areas that don't come easily to you, and this gradually over time leads to an imbalance. And we see that with our poses. We have favorite poses, we have least favorite poses. We see that with parts of our body. Some people have a very well developed abdominal recti, six-pack, but their deep core is weak, and that leads to compression injuries when they're working out. Or our sides may be weak and our front and our back are strong. So one of the best ways to break out of that is play. Playing helps to break down, and especially playing where we're improvising. And then the other thing is to focus on the quality of the sensations you're creating. Look for complexity, variety, new sensations in new areas of your body. Look for the areas that come easily to you and ease up. Look for the activities, the challenges, and push into those a little bit. And over time, you'll find that you begin to increasingly enjoy. The good thing about pushing into a positive feedback loop is if you make any progress at all, it becomes a little easier to make more progress, which makes it even easier to make more progress, and all of a sudden it's effortless. Okay? So it's very hard initially, but it becomes increasingly easy when you're pushing into the positive feedback loop. So I'd like to thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Namaste.